In the 16th century in England, a peculiar kind of entertainment began to take shape, known as freak shows. These shows showcased people with rare physical conditions, displayed to the public as oddities. At the time, deformities weren't merely viewed as differences. They were often seen as supernatural signs or ominous warnings, fueling deeply rooted myths and fears. We'll uncover how their lives were a compelling blend of struggle, resilience, and unexpected fame. But before we move, be sure to like and subscribe for more fascinating stories. Now let's begin with number 15, the Elephant Face Girl. Anita, known to circus goers as the Elephant Face Girl, never had a story that traveled far, but the face did. She had a super severe facial deformity, likely from a rare medical condition like neurofibromatosis, that made her features appear deeply distorted. For promoters, she was an instant headline and money-making machine. Her appearance was compared, insensitively and cruelly, to that of an elephant, and the name stuck. She became part of the Ripley's Believe It or Not circuit, and though little biographical information survives, what we do know comes from the people who saw her perform. Many remembered her as quiet, polite, and surprisingly warm. She wasn't a performer in the traditional sense. She didn't juggle or sing or move wildly. She simply stood there and owned the space. Some stared, others turned away. But Anita stood through it all. Her life remains mostly undocumented, like many women in sideshow history. But she left a mark, not just from her face, but from her beautiful presence. Number 14, the Anatomical Wonder. Ed Hayes, aka Anedo Hayes, earned his stage name by doing something nobody believed was real. He could suck in his stomach so deeply that it seemed to vanish, his belly flattening until it looked like it had collapsed into his backbone. People thought it was a trick, but in actuality, it wasn't. It was all muscle control. He made his living in sideshows and fairgrounds, where crowds paid just to see him breathe. His brother Gene Hayes also performed under the name Anato, and the two sometimes shared the stage. Posters called Ed the Anatomical Wonder, a man who could fold his body in ways that didn't seem possible. He wasn't big or tattooed or born with a condition. He built his act from control, discipline, and one incredibly strange gift. He faded from the public eye like many sideshow artists did, but his name still floats around in carnival archives, remembered by those who watched him disappear, one breath at a time. Number 13, Agnes Schmidt. Agnes Schwarzenbacher, who often performed under the name Agnes Schmidt, was known in the sideshow world as the rubber-skinned girl, or sometimes the elephant girl. She was born in Germany but raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was famous because she had a physical trait no one could overlook. The skin on the top of her legs was over a foot long. It stretched out in thick folds that hung far beyond her body. In the 1930s, she performed with Ripley's Believe It or Not, where audiences lined up to see what newspapers called the girl with stretchable skin. She had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, none of whom shared her condition. Agnes was married at least once, and often described as quiet but friendly. While sideshow banners focused on the extreme, Agnes just leaned into who she was. She didn't hide from her body. She worked with it. Her skin brought her into the spotlight, but it was her calm strength that made her stay there. Number 12, the Armless Fiddler. Karl Hermann Unthan was born on April 5, 1848, in Sommerfeld, East Prussia, with no arms at all. His father refused pity and pushed Karl to adapt early, using only his feet. Before long, Karl could write letters, light cigarettes, and even shuffle cards. As a young adult, he taught himself the violin, gripping the bow and strings with his toes, eventually performing before audiences across Europe. At one point, he was invited to play for Johann Strauss in Vienna. Over time, he was no longer billed as a curiosity. He became a respected musician. During World War I, Carl even worked with amputee soldiers, demonstrating that life after limb loss was still worth living. Unlike many performers labeled cruelly as freaks, Carl aged gracefully, retired comfortably, and passed away in 1928 at the age of 80. His biography, The Armless Fiddler, was published posthumously in 1935. His life wasn't about what he lacked, but what he made possible without it. Number 11. The Living Mummy. Jonathan Bass, known across the sideshow circuit as the Living Mummy, was a man locked inside his own body. Born sometime before 1828, Bass lived a regular life until 1848, when his joints began to stiffen. Over time, ossification set in. His joints hardened, his bones fused, and movement became impossible. Eventually, his limbs froze in place entirely. He remained upright, unable to bend or reposition himself, stuck in the same pose for the rest of his life. His condition was so severe, he had to be carried, propped, and adjusted by others. Despite this, he toured and was exhibited as a medical and visual marvel. Though often silent and still, his presence drew attention and awe. He died on September 15, 1892, from stiffening of the heart, a tragic echo of the disease that locked him in place. Jonathan Bass didn't choose the spotlight, but in a still body, he lived a visible life. He was seen, even if he couldn't move. Number 10. The Man with Hanging Skin. Arthur Lewes performed at Ripley's Auditorium in Chicago in 1933 and immediately became one of its strangest and most unforgettable attractions. His face was covered in thick, pendulous folds of skin that hung heavily from his cheeks and jaw. He suffered from neurofibromatosis, a condition that causes tumors and extreme skin overgrowth, resulting in dramatic changes to his appearance. Arthur was 42 years old when he appeared with Ripley's, and unlike many one-time exhibits, he remained a point of fascination for years. He didn't speak much during performances. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. His condition wasn't masked or glamorized. It was shown exactly as it was. The last known report of Arthur surfaced in 1991 when he was said to be dying at the age of 97. Nearly a century of life with a face the world stared at. But behind the weird skin was a quiet man who simply showed up and faced it. Number 9. The Child with a Twin Inside. Catherine Virginia McDonald was born in 1910 in Virginia. From birth, she carried something no child should, an undeveloped parasitic twin growing inside her chest cavity. The growth caused issues and concern, but surgery at the time wasn't as advanced. Her parents were ordinary, loving people, and tried to give her a quiet, normal childhood despite the condition. Catherine's health was fragile. She had frequent respiratory issues, and her condition left her immune system constantly strained. Shortly after her 5th birthday, she caught tonsillitis and bronchitis. Her small body couldn't fight off the infection. On December 29, 1915, she passed away, just 5 years old. Her life was short, but her story remains one of the strangest and saddest in early medical history. She never made it to the stage, but her name appears in old sideshow and pathology notes, a reminder that even the rarest lives, however brief, can still be remembered. Number 8. The World's Largest Moose. Jack Happy. Eckhart was built big from the start. He weighed 19 pounds at birth. By age 10, he weighed 265 and was already working under P.T. Barnum. Later, he branded himself as the world's largest moose, sometimes the elk, playing into the popularity of fraternal lodges like the Elks and Moose Clubs. At his heaviest, Eckhart reached 739 pounds, but he never let his size be the whole story. Photos captured him posing confidently in toga-like robes, always grinning, fully aware of his role in the spotlight. He toured for decades, using his enormity not as a burden, but as a livelihood. Unlike many in his category, he lived past 60. In 1937, a tragic accident ended his life when a truck crushed his car. His coffin was 6 times the average size, a final echo of his immense presence. "When you live large, you don't leave quietly," one obituary said. Jack didn't. He passed into circus legend with weight, wit, and warmth. Number 7. The 48-pound man. Martin P. Avery was born on August 18, 1836, and you won't believe it, but he weighed just 48 pounds as a grown man. Like for real. He stood 5 feet, 3 inches tall, but his weight never passed 50, making him one of the thinnest men ever documented. He lived in New York and suffered from chronic dyspepsia, a long-term digestive disorder that made eating painful and digestion difficult. Though extremely frail, he still married, lived independently, and tried to maintain a modest life. In a time when extreme physical appearances often led to the sideshow, Martin was simply known by those around him as a man who tried to live normally despite his condition. On July 16, 1882, he died from complications of his illness and pancreatitis. He was buried in Moravian Cemetery in New York. His body may have failed him slowly, but his will to live within it never broke. Martin wasn't a performer. He was a person who endured. Number 6. The second Anato. Gene Hayes, often confused with his brother Ed, also performed under the name Anato Hayes. While Ed was the original anatomical wonder, Gene carried on the name and act after his brother began to step back. Like Ed, Gene had an unusual ability to compress his torso so dramatically that it defied belief. He didn't possess the same level of abdominal control, but the resemblance and shared act meant many couldn't tell the difference. For a time, Gene performed alongside Ed, then on his own. He carried the Anato name into smaller circuits, state fairs, and traveling shows. The photos that survive often show him mid-act, ribs sticking out, midsection sunken in. People gasped. Some thought it was grotesque, others couldn't look away. Gene never reached the same level of fame, but in the strange, forgotten corners of sideshow history, he carved his own spot. He wasn't just Ed's brother, he was his own version. Number 5. Piramal Sami. Piramal Sami, advertised as the double-bodied Hindu enigma, was born in India in 1888 with a parasitic twin fused to his torso. To sell the illusion, the underdeveloped body was dressed as a girl and promoted as Piramal and Sami. Few in the audience ever knew the truth. Early in his career, he toured with his cousin Supramanian Munsami, a little person, alongside 2 performers cruelly billed as pinheads, Gondia and Apexia. Between 1900 and 1915, Piramal performed with the Ringling Brothers sideshow, drawing both awe and ridicule. But behind the curtain, he reportedly despised America. Its cultural ignorance and his forced exploitation wore him down. As soon as he could, Piramal returned to India, vanishing from public records. His life stands as one of the more disturbing examples of sideshow spectacle, where hardship was twisted for ticket sales. "Men are not punished for their sins but by them," said Elbert Hubbard. Piramal never chose that life. It was chosen for him, and even he lived it without any guilt. Number 4. The Fartiste of Paris. Joseph Pujol never expected his life would take him to the center of Parisian fame. But it did. Performing under the name Le Pétoman, Pujol became the most celebrated flatulist in the world. His act wasn't crude. It was astonishing. He could inhale air into his rectum and expel it in precise bursts, imitating thunderclaps, gunfire, and musical notes. In the 1890s, he headlined at the Moulin Rouge, where he extinguished candles from across the stage and even played tunes through rubber tubing. His audience ranged from royalty to scientists, including Freud. After a dispute with management, he opened his own venue, blending physical comedy, mimicry, and music in ways never seen before or since. During World War I, he left the stage behind and opened a bakery, later expanding into biscuit making. He died in 1945 at the age of 88. Pujol turned a bodily oddity into a form of theater, proving that you can do anything. Number 3. The Viking Giant. Johan Pedersen lived a quiet childhood until age 15, when a sudden growth spurt changed everything. He eventually grew to 7 feet 8 inches, though he often exaggerated his height for showmanship. In 1934, he moved to Denmark and began performing across Europe, often paired with little people to maximize visual contrast. During World War II, trapped in Copenhagen, he worked in a shipyard until the conflict ended. By 1948, he moved to the U.S. and joined the Ringling Brothers sideshow. Initially, he performed in formal attire, but later embraced Norse heritage, dressing as the Viking Giant. His act was wildly successful, and he quietly built financial security. In 1950, he appeared in Prehistoric Women, adding film to his resume. He retired in the 1960s to Gibsonton, Florida, re-emerging briefly for a Smithsonian event in 1973. Johan passed in 1984 after a fall. "Pride goeth before destruction," Proverbs says, and for Johan, the end came with cruel, tragic irony. All right, now let's head over to Number 2. The Mattina Brothers. Leo Mattina and his twin brothers, Bela and Matyus, were born in Hungary to John and Maria Mattina. Bela and Matyus, better known by their stage names, Mike and Ike, stood only 32 inches tall. They were recruited young by German promoter Karl Schaffer, who sent them touring through Europe, Asia, and Australia before they arrived in the United States. In 1917, the brothers joined the Ringling Brothers Circus and performed at Madison Square Garden, even selling war bonds while dressed in full military uniform. Fame later brought them to Hollywood, where they appeared as Munchkins in The Wizard of Oz and were said to have inspired Disney's Seven Dwarfs in Snow White. By the 1940s, they had settled in Suffolk, Virginia, where they became respected local figures. In 1954, Mike died in a touring accident. Ike passed from a heart attack in 1965. Leo died in 1975. The three remained bound on stage and off. Number 1. The Bird Girl of Georgia. Coco, famously known as the Bird Girl, was born in 1880 in Georgia with Seckle syndrome, a rare genetic disorder often called bird-headed dwarfism. The condition gave her a small, narrow head, a beak-like nose, and a sharply recessed jaw, features that shaped both her identity and her act. She performed wearing a feathered costume and a tiara resembling a bird's crest, fully leaning into her stage persona. Her shows were filled with peculiar, fluttery movements, arms swinging like wings, head tilts mimicking bird gestures. Through performance, Coco turned her appearance into art, using her condition not as a limitation, but as a creative expression. Her stage presence became a symbol of resilience in a world that too often mocked what it didn't understand. In an era where physical difference was treated as spectacle, she managed to reclaim it on her own terms. Her legacy lives in memory as someone who blurred the line between performance and personal survival. If you've enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you soon in the next one.